The market's looking pretty good today. It's lifted up by, I suppose, the successful handling of the elections. That's the one issue. But news that there's a new executive which effectively took office in the last week.
The market has been doing well since the general elections, since the end of the general elections. Foreign portfolio investors who were skeptical about the outcome of the elections have returned as a result of the downgrading of the heightened political risks. In addition, local portfolio investors as well, local institutional investors have also come back, well into the markets. And right now, since last week, the trend has been in the blue chip sectors, in the blue chip stocks, especially the real sector ones like Ashaka, UAC Properties, UACN itself, because it's a sign of good confidence in the market rather than prior to this time when the speculations were in penny stocks and all that, penny stocks and other small, cap companies. But now people have confidence and they are returning into the good companies as well.
Let's talk about the return to profitability for some of the rescued banks. Finbank, their results, Oceanic as well. And we know that these are banks that have been talked about extensively in terms of consolidation and merger talks. Is it sufficient that they've returned to profitability for new buyers to come through? Just your views?
Everybody is looking at the results. The bottom line is good, but analysts are still looking deeper. Operating income to operating expenses isn't too good. I mean, for a bank like Oceanic, operating income was about 87.5% of operating expense. Loan to deposit ratios for Oceanic was on the average about 43%, while for Finbank it was quite dismal, about 14%. So while they were returning to profitability because of write-downs from previous quarters, you can't really say they are out of it right now. But I mean, investors are quite happy that, okay, recovery has started and new investors are talking with them. So I think it's good news at the end of the day, but it's not yet uhuru.
As new investors look deeper, there are also other issues as to the recapitalization of these banks and what other initiatives might need to be taken by the CBN and indeed AMCON. We heard a statement from the governor at the World Economic Forum that those banks that don't have good enough bids would be recapitalized by AMCON and managed by that institution for some time. What do you make of that?
The CBN chief's view is this. The banks may not be too good, but they're not as bad as prospective investors want them to look like, so that they can pick them, for very cheap values. So he's saying that if we cannot get good valuations, if the acquirers aren't bringing good valuations for these banks, then AMCON is there as a last resort. The First Bank, Oceanic Bank deal fell through. First Bank said we'll rather grow organically. Oceanic Bank came out to say the value they were putting on the table wasn't good enough. So then the AMCON deal comes around as a last resort, that if an acquirer isn't bringing good money, and then, hey, the federal government believes that these banks are still good enough, then AMCON comes in as a last resort to pick up these banks, rather than just giving them out, for little of value.
Moving our attention away from the banks, let's look at the building materials sector. Some of the cement manufacturers have done well in today's session, particularly UAC and Ashaka. What do you attribute that to?
Basically, now that the elections are over, the government is going to get back to work. Ordinarily, the second quarter of every year is the best period for the building materials companies, because that's when the budget, gets pushed out into the system. Contracts are awarded, contracts are executed, contracts are paid for. So the second quarter usually is always the best results for the cement companies. It's just that the second quarter of this year was, we're involved in electioneering and all that. But now that the elections are over, I think the traditional pattern is taking place right now.
All right, your market outlook for the rest of the week. Also, the NSC's website tells us that some of the best performing stocks for today, Chevron in particular was the biggest gainer today. We've seen Owanda also doing very well. We've seen some of the consumer goods stocks doing well, Dangote Sugar, Dangote Flour, Int Breweries. What do you make of some of these counters that have been active today?
Like I said earlier, now that the elections are over, foreign portfolio investors are coming back. Local institutional investors are also coming back. They have their eyes on the big cap companies. They have their eyes on the real sector blue chips. And I mean, when you talk about the real sector blue chips, you talk about the Dangote Cements, Dangote Flours, the UACNs, UAC Properties, Ashaka Cements, and the rest of them. For the rest of the week, the outlook for the week will be judged by the results that will be coming out, the interim results. We're in the we're in the first quarter earnings season. Many companies have started releasing their results, and throughout this week, I believe that these results that will come out this week would help determine the gauge of the market.